Here, you're a kid. It's not very often that the back of the bulletin has something that, I try to make things correlate and make sure that they connect, but today, this one really does connect with what we're talking about today. It gives us a little bit of context. It's been almost a week since we celebrated Halloween. You might know Halloween is a day for trick-or-treating and a ton of candy and sweets and all the things that we should not be eating. And it's costumes and kids' parties. But did you know that it started as a holy day? In fact, the root word of Halloween, hallow, means holy. And the ending of the word "een" is short for evening. Halloween is the eve of the Christian holiday, All Saints' Day. Traditionally, Halloween was the day to defy death, to shout to evil, "Our God is greater, and we are not afraid of you." Centuries ago, Celtic people gathered on this day around bonfires, wore costumes, and enacted battles between forces of good and evil. Some of the rituals we still follow today, like scary costumes and jack-o'-lanterns, and that continues the tradition. All Saints' Day, officially on November 1st, but often celebrated in the United Church of Christ congregations on the first Sunday in November, is a day to remember and honor saintly people in the past. On this day, we might recall those people in our congregation, family, or wider church community who have had an impact on the world in God's name. The following day, November 2nd, is officially All Souls' Day. On this day, we honor everyone who has passed away, especially those who lived ordinary lives, which did not garner recognition like the saints. However, many of us, many churches, combine All Saints and All Souls to celebrate and remind us of God's welcoming all into the tender arms of love and mercy in a life that is to come. So however we celebrate or continue in honoring our worship on this day, this week is a powerful one that can in many ways mirror the entire Christian year. Beginning with the ancient rituals of Halloween, you have had the chance to look death and to face it, to proclaim that you are not afraid because you know that eternal life with God promises a stronger than death attitude. Then on All Saints' Day, we recognize the power of those whose connection to God is especially visible. And then finally, on All Souls' Day, we celebrate a God whose love encompasses all now and into eternity. And frankly, this is the church's way of actively grieving today, which is countercultural in some ways. We sometimes don't take that moment to really just pause and to remember. Our culture, dominant culture, says we have to be strong. You can't let tears shed. And yet we know that's not true. We know when we lose someone, it hurts. It leaves a hole. And so on this day, it's the moment in which the church can do what it does best. It's to nurture each other and to recognize that we all stand and sit together in this common way with all of our losses, and to know that we are deeply loved, that there's that tender, abiding mercy of God walking with us in this journey of faith. And yes, our journey takes us in a variety of different ways. And yet we know that the light of Christ will light our way. So my friends, later on in the service, when we take this opportunity to commune together and to remember, we are mindful that not only are we doing this, but many congregations are doing this on this day. It is the power of connection, the power of covenant, the power of people in prayer that bind us together in knowing that we are not alone in our loss. There is a term throughout this pandemic time, there are terms being floated around like complicated grief, ambiguous grief, and just grief in general. That complicated grief being those moments where you just are having a hard time to make sense of relationships and what's going on in our world. Then you have that ambiguous loss where you can see the loss in front of you. You can see people that you can no longer be in relationship with and those deep connections that have been severed. And then just that loss in general. But to know that we're not alone in that process. That we can reach out to one another. And we can do some prayerful contemplation. We can sit in silence. We can go for a walk. We can look at the sun streaming through stained glass windows. See sunsets and sunrises. And know that God is actively moving in us and through us and around us in that creation story. Holding us in that tenderness of light and love. So we remember on this day, we commune together on this day, and we rejoice with the saints, knowing that we too can gather together and feel the presence of the Holy